Why did packaged snacks become America's guilty pleasure? Was it something inevitable, written into the DNA of a nation always rushing toward the next frontier? Or did it sneak up on us gradually, one crispy, salty, impossibly perfect bite at a time? The funny thing is, if you tried explaining a Dorito to someone from ancient Mesopotamia, they'd probably think you were describing some kind of magic. Though honestly, they might not be entirely wrong about that. Here's what's coming your way over the next little while. A journey through America's most conflicted love affair. The one we have with those crinkly bags and cardboard boxes that somehow make us feel both satisfied and slightly ashamed. Along the way, you might discover why that guilt you feel reaching for your third handful isn't a bug in the system. It's actually a feature. And as we wander through this history together, from Civil War hardtack to Instagram-worthy artisanal chips, you might find your thoughts growing softer, you're breathing a bit deeper, and that constant mental chatter about tomorrow's to-do list finally, starting to fade. And hey, if these stories help you drift off to sleep tonight, maybe drop a gentle thumbs up on your way to dreamland. No pressure though, only if your finger isn't already too heavy with approaching sleep. Speaking of which, what's your go-to midnight snack? The one you sneak from the kitchen when nobody's watching? Drop it in the comments. I promise I won't judge. We're all friends here in the Guilty Pleasure Club. Now, before we dive into tonight's crunchy tale, why don't you adjust that pillow just a bit, let your shoulders drop, and maybe turn your screen brightness down just one more notch. There we go. Perfect. Did ancient civilizations ever imagine food this portable? You're standing in a dusty archaeological site, somewhere in the American Southwest, and the researcher beside you is holding something remarkable. It's a piece of preserved corn, thousands of years old, dried and treated by indigenous peoples who understood something fundamental about survival. Food needed to travel, to last, to sustain life during long journeys and harsh winters. The preservation techniques were ingenious, really. Native Americans had been creating portable foods for millennia before any European set foot on this continent. Pemmican, that concentrated mixture of rendered fat, dried meat, and sometimes berries, could last for years without spoiling. One small pouch contained enough calories to fuel a warrior through days of travel. The Aztecs had their own version, called tlaquetlali, a mixture of chia seeds, corn, and herbs that runners would carry across vast distances. These weren't snacks in our modern sense. They were survival itself, compressed into portable form. But here's where it gets interesting, and scholars still debate about this transition. Somewhere between sustenance and pleasure, American settlers started doing something different with preserved foods. They began adding sugar where none was needed, salt beyond preservation requirements, flavors that served no purpose except to delight the tongue. Archaeological evidence suggests that by the 1700s, frontier families were already experimenting with sweetened dried fruits and salted nuts, not for survival, but for something approaching what we'd recognize as snacking. The Civil War. Now that changed everything. You can almost smell the campfires, hear the distant conversations of soldiers opening their ration packs. Hardtack, those infamous rock-hard crackers, became inadvertently America's first mass-produced snack food. Soldiers would soak them in water or coffee, fry them in pork grease when available, anything to make them palatable. Some entrepreneurial soldiers even created skilly-gilly, crushing hardtack and mixing it with water and sugar to create a sweet mush. Historical accounts describe men hoarding sugar rations specifically for this purpose, the first documented case of Americans transforming survival food into something approaching dessert. What most people don't realize, and this is one of those delightful historical quirks, is that many soldiers developed a genuine fondness for these modified rations. Letters home describe men actually craving certain combinations they'd invented in the field. After the war ended, veterans started requesting similar products from local bakeries. Some historians argue, though the evidence remains somewhat fragmentary, that this created the first real market demand for commercially produced snack foods in America. The late 1800s saw something remarkable happening in American kitchens, and you can picture these scenes so clearly. Women's magazines began publishing recipes for dainties and nibbles, foods designed specifically for eating between meals. This was revolutionary, almost scandalous. The prevailing wisdom held that eating between meals was unhealthy, even morally suspect. Yet here were respectable publications suggesting that mothers prepare small, portable treats for their families. The recipes themselves tell a fascinating story. Popcorn balls held together with molasses, nuts roasted with mysterious spice combinations that families guarded jealously, dried fruit leather rolled into perfect spirals. These weren't just foods, they were becoming part of American social ritual. Church socials, barn raisings, political gatherings, each had its own expected array of portable treats. Meanwhile, and this is where our story takes an unexpected turn, the first commercial snack producers were emerging from the most unlikely places. Traveling salesmen, those peculiar fixtures of 19th century American life, needed food that could survive weeks in saddlebags. Small companies began producing traveler's biscuits and journey cakes, essentially proto-snacks marketed to this mobile population. The Merriam Company of Massachusetts, according to shipping records from 1847, was already producing something called excursion crackers specifically designed for eating while in motion. You're watching America literally invent the concept of recreational eating, and nobody quite realized it was happening. What made factory floors more appetizing than Mother's kitchen? You're peering through the window of a bustling factory in 1895. Watching workers tend to massive ovens that never cool, never vary their temperature by even a degree. The National Biscuit Company, later to become Nabisco, has just opened its first automated production line. And something extraordinary is happening. Americans are beginning to trust these machines more than they trust their own neighbors' kitchens. The psychology behind the shift, it's fascinating when you really think about it. For thousands of years, humans had equated food safety with personal knowledge. You knew the baker, the butcher, the farmer. Now suddenly, people were choosing products made by strangers hundreds of miles away. The key, and this is where things get really clever, was the promise of perfect consistency. Every single cracker that rolled off those production lines was identical. Same size, same color, same snap when you bit into it. Home baking could never achieve that kind of precision. Consider the Unita biscuit, launched in 1898, the world's first nationally branded packaged snack. The name itself, Unita, was genius marketing that modern advertisers still study. But here's the part most people don't know. The revolutionary aspect wasn't the biscuit itself. It was the inner seal package. That waxed paper lining, it promised something no local baker could guarantee: absolute freshness and freedom from contamination. Factory sealed meant untouched by human hands, at least after the packaging stage, though companies conveniently forgot to mention the dozens of hands involved before that point. You can imagine the scenes in grocery stores across America, housewives holding these packages up to the light, examining them with a mixture of suspicion and wonder. The packaging featured a boy in a yellow rain slicker, suggesting these biscuits could survive any weather, any journey, any storage condition. Contemporary accounts describe, though some historians question the authenticity of these numbers, sales reaching 400 million packages within just 5 years. That's more than 5 packages for every person in America, including infants. The machinery itself became part of the appeal, and this is where our modern relationship with processed food really begins. Companies started inviting the public to tour their facilities, to watch the mesmerizing ballet of mechanical production. The Kellogg brothers in Battle Creek, before their famous feud split them apart, would host thousands of visitors who came to watch cornflakes tumbling through gleaming steel drums. One visitor wrote in her diary, and I just love this detail, that watching this cereal production was better than any theater show in Detroit. What these factory tours cleverly concealed, and recent scholarship has revealed this through careful analysis of company records, was the intense experimentation happening behind closed doors. Food scientists, a profession that barely existed before 1900, were discovering how to make things impossibly shelf-stable. They found that adding certain chemicals could prevent oils from going rancid, that specific heating processes could eliminate bacteria while preserving crunch, that precise moisture levels could maintain texture for months. The public saw gleaming efficiency. They didn't see the failed batches, the chemical trials, the occasional worker injury from untested equipment. Here's something that'll make you think differently about those vintage snack ads. Companies began hiring psychologists around 1910 to study eating behaviors. The Cracker Jack Company, those weren't random prizes in those boxes. Internal memos from 1912, recently discovered in corporate archives, reveal a calculated strategy to create anticipation and reward cycles in children. They tested different prize frequencies, surveyed children about their favorites, even studied how long kids would pester parents for another box. The term habit formation appears repeatedly in these documents, decades before anyone understood addiction psychology. The standardization went beyond just the products. It transformed American eating patterns entirely. Factory shifts meant workers needed portable foods at predictable times. The 10 a.m. coffee break, the 3 p.m. snack, these weren't natural hunger patterns. They were industrial schedules that snack companies eagerly filled. Vending machines, first appearing in factories around 1920, created what one executive called captive markets with scheduled appetites. I sometimes wonder what those early factory workers thought, standing at their stations, watching endless rivers of identical crackers flow past. Did they feel proud, helping feed a nation? Or did something feel lost? That human touch, that variation that made grandmother's cookies special precisely because no two are quite the same? The real transformation, and contemporary economists are still debating the full implications of this, was the democratization of luxury. Previously, delicate pastries and fancy biscuits were privileges of the wealthy, requiring skilled bakers and expensive ingredients. Now suddenly, a factory worker could buy a package of cookies that would have impressed a duchess 20 years earlier. This wasn't just about food. It was about class mobility, about American egalitarianism, expressed through equal access to sweet, salty, crunchy pleasures. The machines kept getting faster, more precise, more autonomous. By 1925, a single production line could produce more crackers in an hour than a bakery could make in a month. And Americans kept buying, kept trusting, kept choosing mechanical perfection over human imperfection. The age of industrial snacking had truly begun, though nobody yet imagined just how fundamentally it would reshape American culture. But what would happen when science entered the picture? When laboratories started designing foods specifically to trigger pleasure centers in the brain, when the line between nourishment and indulgence became deliberately, systematically blurred. Could science really make junk food seem nutritious? You're sitting in a laboratory in 1946, watching a food scientist carefully measure vitamin powder into a batch of candy coating. The war has just ended, and the same researchers who developed care rations for soldiers are now turning their attention to the American consumer. They've discovered something remarkable, or perhaps remarkably cynical, that adding a few vitamins to sugar-coated cereal lets you call it part of a nutritious breakfast. The story begins with genuine good intentions. At least that's what the historical record suggests. Post-war America faced real nutritional challenges. Many children showed signs of vitamin deficiencies, particularly in urban areas where fresh produce was scarce and expensive. Food scientists, flush with military research funding, believed they could solve malnutrition through fortification. If you could add vitamins to white bread, why not to cookies? If you could enrich milk, why not candy? Dr. Frederick Stare of Harvard, and this is where things get complicated, became the unofficial spokesman for this movement. His research papers from 1947 to 1952 read like love letters to processed foods. He famously declared that a chocolate bar with added B vitamins is better than an apple without them. What most people didn't know, and investigative journalists wouldn't uncover until the 1970s, was that major snack companies were funding his research department to the tune of millions of dollars. Though to be fair, the evidence suggests Stair genuinely believed what he was saying, at least initially. You can picture the marketing departments absolutely giddy with possibility. Suddenly they had scientific ammunition, real professors from real universities saying their products were healthy. Sugar Crisp cereal ads from 1949 featured laboratory-coated scientists examining bowls of the candy-coated puffed wheat under microscopes. The tagline, "And you can't make this up," was as nourishing as it is delicious. The Federal Trade Commission wouldn't develop rules about health claims for another 20 years, so basically anything was fair game. The terminology itself became a kind of alchemy, transforming junk into gold through careful word choice. Enriched sounded better than processed. Fortified suggested strength rather than artificial additives. Energy-giving was technically true of any caloric food, including pure sugar. Marketing teams discovered that mothers, the primary grocery shoppers, felt less guilty buying snacks labeled with scientific-sounding benefits. Internal focus groups from General Foods, circa 1951, showed that adding "contains essential minerals" to packaging increased purchase intent by 40%, even though the minerals in question were trace amounts that provided negligible nutritional value. Here's the quirky part that food historians love to debate. The placebo effect might have actually made some of these foods beneficial. Studies from the period, though their methodology would horrify modern researchers, showed that children who believed they were eating vitamin-enriched snacks reported feeling more energetic and performed better on simple tasks. Was it the vitamins? The sugar rush? Pure psychological suggestion? We'll never really know, but mothers saw happy, energetic children and kept buying. The breakfast cereal industry became ground zero for this nutritional theater. By 1955, cereals contained more added vitamins than a multivitamin pill, leading to what scientists privately called expensive urine, as bodies simply expelled the excess. Kellogg's Sugar Smacks, which was literally 56% sugar by weight, advertised itself as building strong bodies 12 ways. The 12 ways were never clearly specified, though company documents suggest they just counted up all the added vitamins and minerals, regardless of quantity. Television made everything worse, or better, depending on your perspective. You're watching Saturday morning cartoons in 1958, and between every show, animated scientists explain how Tootsie Rolls provide quick food energy for active children. The word sugar never appears, replaced by dextrose or corn syrup solids or other terms that sounded medicinal rather than indulgent. Some companies hired actual Nobel Prize winners as consultants, not for research, but simply to lend their names to advertising campaigns. I honestly feel a bit sorry for those 1950s mothers trying to do right by their children, surrounded by seemingly authoritative voices telling them that Twinkies contained bodybuilding nutrients. They didn't have nutrition labels to check, no internet to research claims, just trusted experts in white coats assuring them that industrial food science had improved upon nature. The government's response was, well, typically delayed and confused. The FDA spent most of the 1950s trying to define what nutritious actually meant. Meanwhile, the Department of Agriculture was simultaneously promoting consumption of dairy and grain products, many of which ended up in processed snacks, while warning about excessive sugar intake. One department official later admitted, off the record, that they were trying to regulate an industry that was inventing new products faster than we could evaluate them. By 1960, the transformation was complete. American pantries were stocked with nutritious snacks that happened to taste exactly like candy. Children expected dessert-like flavors at breakfast. Parents felt scientifically validated in their purchases, and snack companies had discovered the perfect formula, just enough real nutrition to make health claims, just enough sugar to ensure repeat purchases. But this was only the beginning, because soon, a new invention would change when and how Americans snacked, creating an entirely new eating occasion that hadn't existed before, one that would happen in living rooms across the nation, bathed in the blue glow of a revolutionary new appliance. The television set demanded its own menu. You're sinking into a living room sofa in 1954. The new Zenith console glowing in the corner, and for the first time in human history, dinner isn't happening at the dinner table. Families are balancing plates on their laps, eyes fixed on that flickering screen, and food companies are scrambling to understand what this means for American eating habits. The statistics tell an incredible story. In 1950, only 9% of American homes had a television. By 1955, that number had exploded to 65%. But here's what the numbers don't capture: the complete reorganization of domestic life around broadcast schedules. Dinner time shifted to match the evening news. Children rushed home for afternoon programming, and Sunday night became sacred viewing time for the whole family. Food needed to adapt or risk being left behind. TV dinners, those aluminum-wrapped promises of modern convenience, appeared in 1953. But the real revolution wasn't the frozen meals, it was what happened between meals. You see, television created something that had never existed before: prolonged sedentary entertainment that kept hands free and mouths unoccupied. Reading required holding a book, radio let you move around, but television locked you in place, creating the perfect conditions for mindless consumption. Frito-Lay recognized this opportunity before anyone else. Company records from 1954, discovered in their corporate archives, reveal a deliberate strategy they called companion consumption. The idea was simple but brilliant. Snacks shouldn't compete with TV for attention. They should enhance the viewing experience. This meant foods that were quiet to eat, no loud crunching during dialogue, easy to handle without looking away from the screen, and packaged in bowls or bags that wouldn't block anyone's view. The transformation of popcorn from movie theater treat to home essential perfectly illustrates this shift. Jiffy Pop, introduced in 1958, turned popcorn making into entertainment itself. That aluminum pan expanding like a silver balloon, families would actually pause their shows to watch it grow, then settle back with the bowl for the main feature. Sales figures show Americans consumed more popcorn in living rooms in 1959 than in all movie theaters combined, though interestingly, home popcorn was significantly less buttered, presumably to protect those new sofas. Product development departments went into overdrive. Everything needed to be TV ready. Cheese puffs that dissolved on the tongue without chewing, pretzels redesigned for silent snacking, chips packaged in wider bags for easier lap access. General Mills launched TV Time popcorn with a container specifically shaped to rest on sofa arms. The package featured a family clustered around their set, shadows dancing on their faces from the screen's glow, the perfect image of modern American contentment. Here's something delightfully strange. Snack companies started timing their commercials to trigger immediate cravings. They'd advertise salty snacks right before dramatic moments, knowing viewers would unconsciously reach for something to manage the tension. Sweet snacks got promoted during comedies, associating laughter with sugar. Internal marketing documents called this emotional eating engineering, though that term wouldn't appear publicly for decades. The kids' market became especially sophisticated. Saturday morning cartoons stretched from 7 until noon, 5 hours of continuous programming paired with 5 hours of snack advertising. Cereal companies discovered that children who ate while watching TV consumed 40% more than those eating at tables. The reason? According to pediatric studies from 1957, was that visual distraction overrode satiety signals. Kids simply forgot to feel full. Social dynamics shifted too, and this is where anthropologists get really interested. The family TV snack bowl became a new form of communion, everyone reaching in together, sharing without speaking, bonding through parallel consumption. Some families developed elaborate unspoken rules. Dad got first choice. Kids couldn't grab during important scenes. Mom controlled refill timing. These rituals, completely invented within a single decade, felt as ancient and essential as any dining tradition. Television also democratized snacking schedules. Prime time meant snack time, regardless of when you'd eaten dinner. The Ed Sullivan Show on Sunday nights became synonymous with special treats. Families would actually shop specifically for Sullivan snacks. Monday Night Baseball created its own snacking culture, with beer and peanuts moving from stadium to sofa. The rigid 3-meal structure that had governed American eating for generations simply dissolved into the broadcast schedule. I find it remarkable how quickly this all became normal. Within a single decade, Americans went from considering eating outside the dining room slightly scandalous to feeling weird if they watched TV without snacks. The coffee table, originally designed for decorative purposes, became a snack staging area. Furniture stores started selling TV trays, those folding metal tables that turned any chair into a dining spot. By 1960, the average American family was consuming 23% of their daily calories in front of the television. Nutritionists expressed concern, but their warnings couldn't compete with the combined power of convenience, entertainment, and carefully engineered flavors designed to complement, never compete with, whatever was on screen. The marriage between television and snacking was complete, transforming both industries forever. But even as families gathered in their living rooms, munching contentedly in the cathode glow, a new kind of store was appearing on street corners, one that would make snacks available not just during TV time, but absolutely any time, day or night, forever changing our relationship with impulse and indulgence. Convenience stores became America's new pantries. You're pushing through glass doors at 2 in the morning, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and there it is, an entire wall of snacks glowing like edible jewels. The year is 1965. And 7-Eleven has just announced 24-hour operations at select locations. Nobody quite realizes it yet, but this moment marks the death of scheduled eating and the birth of perpetual availability. The transformation started innocently enough. Southland Ice Company in Dallas, back in 1927, began selling milk and eggs alongside ice blocks. Pure convenience for customers who forgot something at the grocery store. But by the 1960s, these corner stores had evolved into something unprecedented in human history. Food retailers that never closed, never judged, never asked why you needed Fritos at 3 a.m. The numbers reveal the magnitude of this shift. In 1960, America had roughly 500 stores operating extended hours. By 1970, that number exceeded 15,000. But statistics don't capture the psychological revolution, the complete rewiring of impulse control when satisfaction became perpetually 7 minutes away. Urban planners started noticing something strange. People would drive past closed grocery stores to reach an open convenience store, paying premium prices for the privilege of immediate gratification. Here's what made convenience stores genius. They understood snacking better than snackers understood themselves. The layout wasn't random, oh no. It was choreographed temptation. Chips and candy at eye level, refrigerated drinks in the back forcing you past everything else, individual portions at the register for that last-second weakness. Store designers studied traffic patterns, heat maps of where eyes lingered, the exact distance from door to desire that maximized unplanned purchases. The invention of the Slurpee in 1966. Now that changed everything about summer snacking. 7-Eleven's frozen carbonated beverage wasn't quite a drink, wasn't quite a dessert, existed in this liminal space that made it acceptable at any hour. Kids would bike miles for that brain freeze, creating the first generation of brand pilgrims. Internal company documents reveal they intentionally made the cups too large to finish quickly, ensuring customers lingered, browsed, inevitably grabbed something salty to balance the sweet. Individual packaging revolutionized the guilt equation. A family-sized bag of chips felt like commitment, maybe even shame. But a single serving bag? That was just a snack, barely worth mentioning, certainly not worth resisting. Frito-Lay saw individual portion sales increase by 300% between 1964 and 1968, mostly through convenience stores. The psychological barrier to purchase had simply evaporated. Night shift workers became an unexpected goldmine. Factories running 24 hours created workers who ate dinner at dawn, lunch at midnight, and needed snacks whenever their bodies demanded fuel. Convenience stores positioned themselves near industrial areas, becoming de facto cafeterias for the nocturnal workforce. One store owner in Detroit reported that his 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. sales rivaled his noon rush, entirely from workers grabbing armfuls of packaged foods. The social dynamics fascinate me, particularly how convenience stores became judgment-free zones. You could buy ice cream for breakfast, beef jerky for dinner, candy bars for lunch, and the clerk wouldn't blink. Compare that to the local grocery where Mrs. Henderson would definitely notice your cart full of Hostess products and mention it to your mother at church. Convenience stores offered anonymity, freedom from the social surveillance that had always governed food choices. College campuses became convenience store ecosystems. By 1968, every major university had at least one 24-hour option within walking distance of dorms. Students, freed from parental oversight and meal schedules, discovered they could survive entirely on packaged snacks. The freshman 15 phenomenon, weight gained in the first year of college, correlates directly with convenience store proliferation near campuses, though researchers still debate whether correlation implies causation. The stores themselves evolved into strange modern temples. Those fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly surreal. The electronic door chimes announcing each pilgrim's arrival. The heavy smell of coffee mixing with air conditioning and cellophane. It all created an atmosphere outside normal time. 3 p.m. felt identical to 3 a.m. Tuesday indistinguishable from Saturday. Snacking became untethered from clocks, calendars, customs. Regional chains developed distinct personalities through their snack selections. Wawa in Pennsylvania became famous for soft pretzels. Circle K in the Southwest for Mexican candy. Stewart's in upstate New York for ice cream at any hour. These weren't just stores, they were cultural institutions, repositories of local snacking preferences available whenever craving struck. Emergency snacking became normalized. Forgot to eat dinner? Convenience store. Unexpected guests? Convenience store. Bad day requiring immediate chocolate? Convenience store. The very name promised solution, relief, satisfaction. Marketing campaigns stopped advertising products and started selling emotional rescue. Oh, thank heaven for 7-Eleven wasn't about the stores. It was about salvation from hunger, boredom, sadness, available 24/7. By 1970, the infrastructure was complete. Every American urban and suburban dweller lived within 10 minutes of always available snacks. The question was no longer, should I have a snack, but rather, which snack do I want right now? Restraint became almost impossible when temptation never slept, never closed, never said no. But just as Americans embraced this new freedom, this liberation from eating schedules and social judgment, something unexpected happened. Scientists started publishing studies about sugar, fat, salt, and suddenly the very snacks that had become so essential, so available, so normal, were being called dangerous, even deadly. Yet, somehow health warnings only made them more irresistible. You're standing in a supermarket aisle in 1973, watching a mother read the new nutrition label on a bag of Doritos, frowning at the sodium content, then tossing 2 bags into her cart anyway. The Senate has just held hearings on nutrition and human needs. Scientists are warning about the dangers of processed foods, and snack sales are climbing faster than ever before. The paradox started with the best intentions. In 1971, the White House Conference on Food, Nutrition, and Health presented alarming data about American eating habits. Sugar consumption had tripled since 1900. Heart disease was skyrocketing. Diabetes rates were climbing steadily. The evidence was overwhelming. Processed snacks were contributing to a national health crisis. The logical response would have been decreased consumption, but logic had nothing to do with what happened next. Senator George McGovern's Select Committee on Nutrition released dietary goals in 1977 that specifically called out snack foods as problematic. The report, which food companies tried desperately to suppress, recommended Americans reduce sugar intake by 40% and cut salt consumption by half. Major newspapers ran headlines about killer snacks and junk food epidemics. Parents started hiding candy, schools banned vending machines, nutritionists appeared on talk shows describing Twinkies as diabetes in cellophane. But here's what nobody expected. The more forbidden snacks became, the more Americans craved them. Sales data from 1975 to 1980 shows consumption of salty snacks increased by 37% during the exact period when health warnings were most intense. Psychologists studying this phenomenon, though their research wouldn't be published until years later, identified something called reactance theory, the human tendency to desire what we're told we shouldn't have. The snack industry's response was brilliantly cynical. Instead of fighting the health warnings, they embraced them with a wink. Advertisements started featuring rebellious themes. Go ahead, be bad. Your mother wouldn't approve. For those who dare to indulge. Lay's launched a campaign in 1979 with the tagline, "Betcha, can't eat just one." simultaneously acknowledging the addictive nature of their product while challenging consumers to prove them wrong. Product development took a fascinating turn. Companies started creating health-conscious versions of their snacks that were somehow even more appealing than the originals. Baked chips that promised all the taste, less guilt, diet sodas to accompany full-calorie snacks, 100-calorie packs that people would eat 3 at a time. The message was clear. You could have your snacks and your health consciousness too, even if the math didn't quite work out. The data on childhood consumption is particularly revealing. Despite, or perhaps because of, increased parental restrictions, kids' snack consumption rose dramatically. Halloween candy hauls got larger as it became more taboo. Birthday parties featured increasingly elaborate junk food spreads as everyday access decreased. The special occasion became permission for excess. One study from 1978, conducted in suburban Minneapolis, found that children from households with the strictest snack rules consumed more calories from junk food than those with moderate policies. They just did it outside the home. Television advertising adapted cleverly to the new landscape. Since directly promoting unhealthy eating was becoming problematic, commercials shifted to selling experiences rather than products. Chips weren't food, they were party enablers. Candy wasn't sugar, it was happiness you could unwrap. Cookies weren't empty calories, they were memories waiting to happen. The nutritional warnings were never disputed, just made irrelevant to the emotional transaction. Here's something I find particularly intriguing: the emergence of snacking as a form of rebellion. The 1970s counterculture had questioned everything: war, government, social norms, and now food choices became another way to assert independence. Eating junk food became a small act of defiance, a way to reject authority, even if that authority was trying to protect your health. Convenience stores reported increased sales during exam weeks, tax season, any period of stress when people needed to rebel against something, anything. The diet industry exploded simultaneously with snack consumption, creating a bizarre cycle of indulgence and penance. Americans would diet frantically Monday through Thursday, then reward themselves with weekend snack binges. Weight Watchers meetings were held in churches that hosted bake sales in the same halls. The cognitive dissonance was spectacular and apparently sustainable, as both industries thrived on the tension between desire and denial. Regional health initiatives produced unexpected results. Berkeley, California banned candy sales near schools in 1976, only to see kids traveling farther to buy larger quantities. A Boston program that replaced vending machine snacks with healthy alternatives lasted exactly 1 semester, before protests from students and plummeting revenues forced a reversal. The pattern repeated everywhere. Health interventions increased the perceived value of forbidden snacks. Cultural critics noticed something profound happening. Snacking was becoming a form of self-medication for modern life's anxieties. The more stressed Americans felt about their health, their weight, their choices, the more they reached for the very foods causing that stress. It was a feedback loop that no amount of Surgeon General warnings could interrupt. The guilt had somehow become part of the experience, maybe even essential to it. By 1980, Americans were more informed about nutrition than ever before, and eating more snacks than at any point in history. The warnings hadn't failed exactly. They'd been incorporated into the ritual. People would literally announce their dietary sins. I shouldn't be eating this, while unwrapping candy bars, as if confession somehow neutralized calories. But even as Americans wrestled with this guilt, creative marketers were already plotting the next phase, transforming shame into sophistication, making indulgence feel not just acceptable, but actually virtuous. Then why did premium pricing make guilt feel better? You're examining a $4 bag of artisanal potato chips in 1985, made from heritage potatoes, fried in imported olive oil, sprinkled with Mediterranean sea salt. The bag is smaller than the 99-cent Lay's beside it, yet somehow, paying more makes you feel like you're making a better choice. This is the moment American snacking discovered that luxury could launder guilt. The transformation began in upscale Manhattan delis. Dean and DeLuca started importing European chocolates and Japanese rice crackers in 1983, positioning them not as snacks but as taste experiences. These weren't impulse purchases, they were curated selections. The markup was astronomical, sometimes 400% over similar domestic products, yet customers lined up eagerly. Internal sales reports from that first year, shared at a food industry conference, showed that buyers skewed highly educated and health conscious, exactly the demographic that should have known better. Cape Cod potato chips pioneered the domestic premium snack in 1980, and their approach was genius. They kept the chips visibly imperfect, thick cut, slightly burnt edges, irregular shapes. Everything mass production had eliminated, they brought back as markers of authenticity. The higher price wasn't for better ingredients, though they certainly emphasized those. It was for the permission to indulge without feeling common. You weren't eating junk food, you were appreciating craft. The psychology behind this is fascinating, and researchers are still unpacking all the mechanisms. A Stanford study from 1986, though limited in scope, found that people reported less guilt eating expensive snacks than cheap ones, even when the caloric content was identical. The price tag seemed to function as a form of portion control. You savored what cost more, ate it slower, felt more satisfied with less. Of course, this only worked if you didn't then also eat the regular snacks, which plenty of people did. Haagen-Dazs deserves special mention for perfecting premium positioning. The name, completely fabricated to sound Scandinavian, the dense texture that emphasized richness over quantity, the simple flavors that suggested purity, everything whispered quality while shouting expensive. By 1985, Americans were paying 5 times more per ounce for Haagen-Dazs than for regular ice cream, and feeling virtuous about it. The founder later admitted, in a rare candid interview, that he'd initially priced it high just to see what would happen, then watched amazed as higher prices actually increased demand. The gourmet popcorn trend of the mid-1980s revealed something profound about American snacking psychology. Garrett Popcorn in Chicago was charging $10 for what amounted to a large movie theater popcorn with fancy seasonings. But customers weren't just buying popcorn, they were purchasing a narrative. This was popcorn worth waiting in line for, worth traveling to specific locations for, worth giving as gifts. The experience of acquisition became part of the product's value. Here's what really intrigues me: how quickly artisanal became a moral category rather than a production method. By 1987, major corporations were launching premium sub-brands that were manufactured on the same factory lines as their regular products, just with different packaging and doubled prices. Pepperidge Farm's distinctive cookies, Frito-Lay's deli-style chips, mechanically produced but semiotically superior. Consumers knew, or should have known, but chose to believe the fiction because it made them feel better about their choices. The winification of snack marketing was particularly clever. Suddenly chips had flavor notes and finish, chocolates had terroir, pretzels had mouthfeel. The language of connoisseurship transformed consumption into appreciation. You weren't gorging, you were tasting. Food magazines started reviewing snacks like restaurants, assigning stars, recommending pairings. The cultural elevation was complete. Junk food had become gourmet. Whole Foods Market, opening its first stores in the early 1980s, created temples to premium snacking. Those bulk bins of yogurt-covered pretzels and chocolate-covered espresso beans, priced at $15 per pound, positioned indulgence as somehow healthy just through proximity to organic vegetables. The store layout was deliberately designed, according to former employees, to make shoppers feel virtuous enough in the produce section to justify splurges in the snack aisles. Gift-giving provided the ultimate guilt laundering. Expensive chocolates for Valentine's Day, gourmet popcorn tins for Christmas, premium nuts for hostess gifts. The special occasion justified both the expense and the indulgence. Companies started creating elaborate packaging that made snacks look like jewelry, because at those prices, that's essentially what they were. The Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog of 1988 featured a $1,000 collection of rare potato chips from around the world, and it sold out. The data on who bought premium snacks is revealing. Market research from 1989 shows that the same consumers who bought diet products and gym memberships were the primary purchasers of gourmet junk food. The contradiction didn't seem to bother anyone, perhaps because the premium price created a sense of control. You could afford to eat this. Therefore you were choosing to. Therefore it was fine. The logic was circular but emotionally satisfying. Regional producers emerged to serve local premium markets. Vermont maple cookies, Portland small batch donuts, Austin artisanal beef jerky, each promising authenticity through geography and price. The more specific the origin story, the higher the acceptable markup. Made in Brooklyn could add $3 to a bag of pretzels, even if the pretzels were objectively identical to those made in New Jersey. By 1990, America had developed a two-tier snacking system. Regular snacks for regular moments, premium snacks for when you wanted to feel special about your guilty pleasure. The guilt hadn't disappeared. It had been repackaged as sophistication. But even as Americans embraced $8 chocolate bars and $12 bags of trail mix, technology was about to introduce an innovation that would change everything about how much we ate without realizing it. A single serving bag changed everything about portion control. You're standing in a gas station in 1992, staring at a revolutionary invention, a bag of chips designed for one person, one moment, one guilty pleasure that somehow felt innocent because it had boundaries. The 100-calorie pack hadn't been invented yet, but its ancestor, the single-serve portion, was about to rewire America's snacking brain in ways nobody anticipated. The mathematics of portion distortion started decades earlier. In 1955, a standard bag of chips weighed 1 ounce. By 1985, the small bag had grown to 2 ounces. The old large had become the new normal. But consumers didn't consciously register this expansion. According to Cornell Food Lab studies, our brains anchor on package units rather than actual quantities. 1 bag equals 1 serving, regardless of whether that bag contains 50 calories or 500. Frito-Lay's decision to introduce the Big Grab line in 1993 was presented as convenience innovation, but internal documents revealed through industry whistleblowers suggest a more calculated strategy. Single-serve bags priced at 99 cents generated 3 times the profit margin of family-sized bags. The packaging cost more per ounce. The distribution was less efficient, yet consumers happily paid the premium for pre-measured permission to indulge. The guilt was contained, literally, in a package that declared its own limits. The psychological trick was brilliant. A family-sized bag opened at home triggered complex negotiations with yourself, with family members, with your conscience about how much was reasonable. But a single-serve bag? That decision was made for you. The manufacturer had essentially become your portion control partner. Never mind that they'd steadily increased what constituted a single serving every few years. Here's where it gets particularly fascinating. Vending machines drove the single-serve revolution. By 1995, there were 2 million snack vending machines in America, each one a portal to instant, portion-controlled gratification. The machine itself became a behavioral modifier. You could only buy 1 bag at a time, had to make a conscious decision for each purchase, felt like you were exercising restraint even while feeding the habit. Office workers reported in anonymous surveys buying 3 or 4 single bags per day, but feeling less guilty than if they'd eaten from 1 large bag. The variety pack phenomenon emerged as single-serve packaging's clever sibling. Suddenly you could buy 30 individual bags bundled together, supposedly for lunchboxes and family convenience. But behavioral research from the late 1990s revealed that these variety packs actually increased consumption by 40%. The rationalization was perfect. You were buying in bulk to save money. Portion control was built in, and the variety prevented boredom. Parents felt virtuous buying them. Kids felt special getting their own bag. Everyone ignored that the house was now stocked with 30 opportunities for snacking. Airlines became inadvertent portion control educators. Those tiny bags of peanuts, later pretzels, taught Americans that snacks could be ceremonial rather than substantial. The ritual of opening the package, the anticipation, the controlled duration of consumption, it all mattered more than quantity. Some behavioral economists argue, though the data remains contested, that airline snacking trained a generation to find satisfaction in smaller portions, even as portion sizes everywhere else exploded. The 100-calorie pack revolution of 2004 deserves special attention, even though it slightly postdates our main timeline. Nabisco's 100-calorie packs weren't new products. They were existing cookies and crackers in tiny packages. The price per ounce was astronomical, sometimes 5 times higher than regular packages. Yet sales exploded to $400 million within 2 years. The message was clear. Americans would pay almost anything for the illusion of self-control. What marketers understood, and neuroscience later confirmed, was that package opening triggers a dopamine response separate from actual consumption. Multiple small packages meant multiple hits of anticipation and reward. You're watching the birth of what researchers now call microdosing snacks, getting the psychological satisfaction of snacking with theoretically less caloric impact. Theoretically, because studies showed people often ate multiple single-serve packages in one sitting. The environmental impact was staggering, though nobody wanted to discuss it. Single-serve packaging generated 3 times the waste of traditional sizing. Those individual chip bags, with their metallic lining that made recycling impossible, started appearing everywhere. Beaches, parks, schools. The landscape of America became littered with evidence of portion-controlled indulgence. Some municipalities tried to ban single-serve packaging, but the convenience lobby was too powerful, the consumer demand too intense. Gas stations transformed into portion control theaters. The counter display became a careful orchestration of single-serve temptations, each one seemingly harmless, each one precisely priced at that psychological sweet spot where guilt meets permission. $2 felt like nothing, even when you bought 4 items, even when those 4 items contained more calories than a full meal. Children's birthday parties revealed the dark side of single-serve culture. Suddenly every child needed their own bag of everything. Sharing became unsanitary. Communal bowls seemed primitive. The social ritual of reaching into the same chip bowl, that tiny act of community, disappeared into individual packages. Birthday party costs tripled, waste quadrupled, but everyone felt safer, more in control. Here's what really gets me. The single-serve revolution made snacking invisible. A large empty bag was evidence, testimony to indulgence. But tiny wrappers? They disappeared into pockets, car cup holders, desk drawers. The evidence evaporated even as consumption increased. People literally forgot how much they'd eaten when the packages were small enough to forget. By 2000, the average American consumed 30% more snack calories than in 1980, but felt more in control of their eating than ever before. The single-serve bag had performed its magic trick, making overconsumption disappear behind the illusion of moderation. Yet, even as Americans celebrated their newfound portion control, something deeper was happening in the national psyche, something that would transform snacking from mere consumption into emotional archaeology. Finally, did nostalgia become the most powerful flavor of all? You're walking through a grocery store in 2005, and there it is, a display of retro snacks in vintage packaging. Twinkies in their 1960s wrapper, Fritos in the original corn-colored bag, moon pies looking exactly like they did in your grandmother's pantry. The prices are modern, even premium, but what you're really buying is time travel, one bite at a time. The nostalgia economy emerged gradually, then suddenly. Market researchers in the late 1990s noticed something peculiar in focus groups. When asked about favorite snacks, adults didn't describe current products. They rhapsodized about childhood treats. The emotional intensity was remarkable. People would literally tear up describing the Hostess fruit pies their mothers packed for lunch, the Pop Rocks that exploded on their tongues at summer camp, the Dunkaroos they traded at recess. These weren't just foods, they were edible memories. General Mills struck gold when they brought back French Toast Crunch in 2003 after massive online petitions. The cereal had been discontinued in 1995, but millennials who'd eaten it as children launched a campaign that generated 30,000 signatures. The relaunch sold out nationwide within weeks, though sales data suggests most buyers tried it once, realized it didn't taste like their memories, then kept the box anyway as a totem of simpler times. The taste mattered less than the feeling of recovered childhood. The science behind nostalgia snacking is genuinely fascinating. Neurological studies from Harvard Medical School, published in 2004, showed that foods associated with childhood memories activate both pleasure and comfort centers in the brain simultaneously. The hippocampus, where memories live, literally influences how taste receptors process flavors. That gas station honey bun doesn't just taste sweet, it tastes like Saturday mornings with Dad, like freedom from adult responsibilities, like a time when your biggest worry was missing cartoons. Here's what makes this particularly poignant. The snacks themselves often haven't changed, but everything around them has. A Snickers bar uses essentially the same recipe from 1964, but eating one in 2005 carries the weight of 40 years of guilt education, health warnings, calorie counting. The nostalgia isn't for the snack, It's for the innocence of eating without consequence, without knowledge, without shame. You're not really tasting chocolate and peanuts. You're tasting the absence of anxiety. Discontinuation became a powerful marketing tool. When crispy M&Ms disappeared in 2005, fans created websites, Facebook groups, even held mock funerals. The passion seemed disproportionate to the product until you realized people weren't mourning candy. They were mourning the erasure of their childhood landmarks. Every discontinued snack was another piece of personal history vanishing, another reminder that nothing stays the same, not even junk food. Regional snacks became especially powerful nostalgia triggers. Tasty cakes for Philadelphians, Verner's for Detroiters, Zapp's chips for New Orleanians. These weren't just local products, they were tribal identifiers. Expatriates would pay ridiculous shipping costs to have hometown snacks delivered, not because they were superior, but because they tasted like belonging. Online retailers emerged specifically to traffic in regional nostalgia, shipping moon pies to Seattle, cheerwine to Chicago, crystallizing homesickness into commerce. The limited edition comeback strategy exploited nostalgia brilliantly. Surge Soda returned for exactly 3 months in 2003, creating panic buying and hoarding. People weren't stocking up on citrus soda, they were stockpiling teenage memories. Some buyers admitted to never opening their purchased cans, keeping them as artifacts, proof that the past could be recovered, if only temporarily, if only in aluminum form. Movie theater candy revealed nostalgia's true power. Those boxes of Junior Mints, Milk Duds, Raisinets, they cost 5 times grocery store prices, yet people paid happily. Surveys showed consumers knew they were overpaying, didn't care, because they weren't buying candy. They were buying the complete experience of childhood moviegoing. The overpriced Skittles were actually underpriced memories, a bargain for time travel. What intrigues me most, and cultural anthropologists are just beginning to study this, is how nostalgia snacking became intergenerational bonding. Parents started deliberately introducing their children to their own childhood snacks, creating shared experiences across decades. This is what mommy ate when she was your age became a powerful ritual, transmitting not just flavors, but family history. The snack became a bridge between generations, an edible heirloom that cost 99 cents. Corporate archives became treasure troves as companies realized their history had monetary value. Pepsi started releasing throwback versions with real sugar instead of corn syrup, not because sugar was healthier, but because it tasted like the 1970s. Doritos brought back taco flavor from 1967. Oreo resurrected Big Stuff from 1987. Each relaunch accompanied by carefully curated memories, old commercials on YouTube, vintage packaging that triggered powerful sense memories. The eBay economy for discontinued snacks reached absurd heights. A single Butterfinger BB from 1998 sold for $50. Unopened boxes of 1980s cereal commanded hundreds. These weren't food purchases, they were archaeology acquisitions, people buying back pieces of their past at any price. The expiration dates had long passed. The food was inedible, but that was never the point. Comfort eating evolved into memory eating. Stress didn't just drive people to snacks, it drove them to specific snacks from specific times. Bad breakup? Clearly Canadian from junior high. Job loss? Bugles from elementary school. Parents' illness? Whatever they used to keep in their pantry. The foods became emotional pharmaceuticals, self-prescribed doses of remembered happiness. By 2010, nostalgia had become the most powerful force in snack marketing, more compelling than health claims, more persuasive than premium positioning, more addictive than any ingredient. But this created the ultimate paradox, one that would define American snacking culture going forward. The guilt became part of the pleasure itself. You're reaching into a bag of chips at midnight in 2010, fully aware of every calorie, every health risk, every reason you shouldn't, and that knowledge somehow makes each bite taste better. American snacking has evolved into something unprecedented in human history, a culture that has made shame inseparable from satisfaction, where the violation of our own rules becomes the primary source of enjoyment. The transformation is complete but contradictory. Americans spend more on diet products than any nation on earth, while simultaneously consuming more snack foods per capita than ever before. The average household, according to Nielsen data from 2010, contains both kale chips and Doritos, protein bars and candy bars, organic fruit and fruit roll-ups. We've built entire pantries as shrines to our internal conflicts, each shelf a testament to competing desires that we've stopped trying to reconcile. Social media amplified this paradox brilliantly. Instagram became flooded with cheat day posts, elaborate displays of junk food consumption presented as rebellion against self-imposed restriction. The guilt wasn't hidden, it was hashtagged. Sorry Not Sorry became the rallying cry of snackers who wanted credit both for their discipline and their lapses. You could track someone's diet journey in the morning and their donut binge that evening, both posts getting equal likes, equal validation. The phrase guilty pleasure itself became a cultural badge of honor. Food bloggers started Guilty Pleasure Friday features. Magazines ran Guilty Pleasure columns. Restaurants added Guilty Pleasure sections to menus. The guilt wasn't something to overcome. It was the seasoning that made indulgence palatable to our health-conscious egos. Without guilt, the pleasure felt somehow incomplete, like eating salt without chips. Here's what psychological research from 2009 revealed, and this is genuinely remarkable. Americans who felt most guilty about snacking also reported the highest satisfaction from it. The cognitive dissonance created a heightened emotional state that intensified every sensation. That forbidden Twinkie didn't just taste sweet, it tasted like transgression, like freedom, like a tiny personal revolution against the tyranny of wellness culture. The guilt amplified the pleasure through psychological mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. Workplace snacking became a theater of performed guilt. Office kitchens turned into confession booths where coworkers announced their sins while committing them. "I shouldn't be eating this" became the required preface to every donut. "This is so bad," the obligatory commentary while unwrapping candy. The public acknowledgement of guilt somehow neutralized it, made it communal, acceptable. Everyone was failing together, which meant nobody was really failing at all. The diet industry and snack industry became strange bedfellows, each feeding off the other's success. Weight Watchers assigned point values to every possible snack, creating a complex economy where you could trade real food for junk food through mathematical gymnastics. Jenny Craig sold portion-controlled versions of candy bars. Atkins made low-carb cookies that tasted like cardboard but satisfied the ritual of snacking. Both industries thrived on the cycle of restriction and rebellion, each making the other necessary. Marketing evolved to embrace the guilt-pleasure fusion. Sinfully delicious, wickedly good, dangerously addictive, the language of transgression became standard advertising copy. Ben and Jerry's named flavors like Chubby Hubby and Guilty Pleasure, acknowledging and celebrating the shame their products might cause. The wink and nod to guilt became part of the brand promise. "We know you shouldn't, that's why you will." Seasonal permission structures emerged to manage collective guilt. Super Bowl Sunday became National Junk Food Amnesty Day. Halloween extended from one night to an entire month of fun-sized rationalization. The holidays provided 6 weeks of socially sanctioned excess. These weren't just celebrations. They were pressure release valves for a culture wound tight with dietary restriction. The guilt was temporarily suspended, only to return with vengeance in January's resolution season. What fascinates me is how children absorbed this guilty pleasure framework. Kids as young as 6 would declare foods bad while eating them, had already learned the language of dietary transgression. They'd hide candy wrappers not from parents, but from themselves, already practicing the adult art of evidence elimination. The guilt culture had become so pervasive that even children felt it, performed it, found pleasure in it. The organic snack movement tried to eliminate guilt through ingredient purification, but ended up creating new categories of acceptable indulgence. Organic cookies were still cookies, but the organic label provided moral cover. Non-GMO chips were still chips, but felt virtuous by comparison. The guilt didn't disappear. It just became more sophisticated, requiring higher prices and better packaging to properly assuage. Late-night snacking became the final frontier of guilty pleasure. Those hours between midnight and dawn, when nobody's watching, when tomorrow feels far away, when today's calorie count has already been blown, that's when American snacking achieved its purest form. The guilt was maximum, the pleasure intense, the secrecy complete. Night snacking wasn't just eating, it was a private rebellion against daytime discipline. Clinical studies from 2010 found that attempting to eliminate guilt from snacking actually decreased enjoyment. Subjects given unlimited permission to eat junk food without judgment reported less satisfaction than those who maintained their usual guilt frameworks. The conclusion was unsettling. We literally become addicted to the shame, needed it to properly enjoy our treats. The guilt wasn't a bug in American snack culture, it was the central feature. By 2010, Americans had achieved something unprecedented. We'd made guilt and pleasure so intertwined that they became a single emotion, a uniquely American feeling that other cultures struggled to understand. We created a $400 billion industry built on the foundation of systematic self-violation, where the breaking of our own rules became our primary source of comfort. And perhaps, in the end, that's exactly what we needed all along: permission to be imperfect, to fail at our impossible standards, to find pleasure in our flaws, one guilty bite at a time. And here we are, at the end of our journey through America's most conflicted love affair. You've traveled from Civil War hardtack to Instagram-worthy artisanal chips, from factory floors to convenience stores, from innocent indulgence to guilty pleasure. And maybe, just maybe, you understand now why that bag of chips in your pantry carries so much weight, so much history, so much meaning beyond its mere calories. The story we've traced tonight isn't really about snacks, is it? It's about us, about how we've learned to navigate pleasure and shame, convenience and consequence, desire and discipline. It's about a culture that turned eating between meals into a $400 billion meditation on what it means to be human, flawed, hungry for more than just food. Your breathing is probably slower now, your mind drifting through all those moments. The TV dinners and popcorn, the late-night convenience store runs, the premium chocolate bars that made you feel sophisticated, the childhood cereals that made you feel young. They're all part of you, woven into your memories, your habits, your midnight reaches into the kitchen. Let your eyes close for a moment. Feel how heavy they've become. There's something oddly comforting about knowing that millions of others share this same contradiction, this same guilty pleasure. We're all in this together, reaching for snacks we know we shouldn't have, finding comfort in the very act of breaking our own rules. The room around you is quiet now, the day's obligations fading, tomorrow's concerns not yet formed. This is the time when snacking makes the most sense, when the guilt dissolves into something softer, gentler, more forgiving. You're not failing at perfection, you're succeeding at being wonderfully, ordinarily human. Your body is sinking deeper into comfort. Each breath a little longer than the last. Each thought a little hazier, a little sweeter, like sugar dissolving slowly on your tongue. The history of snacking is really the history of permission, giving ourselves small allowances, tiny rebellions, little pleasures that make the larger struggles bearable. Perhaps tomorrow you'll reach for that snack and remember something from tonight. Maybe about vitamin-fortified candy, or single-serve psychology, or nostalgia's flavor. Or maybe you'll just smile, knowing that your guilty pleasure connects you to generations of Americans who've walked this same tightrope between what we should do and what we actually do. Let everything drift now. Let the stories settle like sediment, forming layers in your sleeping mind. The factories and convenience stores, the TV glow and vending machines, all of it becoming distant, dreamy, dissolved into the approaching darkness. Your breathing is so calm now, so measured, the weight of consciousness lifting, floating away like an empty chip bag on the wind. There's no guilt in rest, no shame in letting go, only the sweet release of a day completed, a story told, a mind ready for dreams. Sleep is so close now, so inevitable, as certain as tomorrow's cravings, as gentle as nostalgia, as forgiving as a culture that learned to embrace its contradictions. Close your eyes completely. Let the last conscious thought be kind, be soft, be accepting of all your beautiful imperfections.